Jackson. I'm an electrical inspector for the Electrical Safety Authority. This presentation is just an overview on, and I'll use the term ESA, it's just easier to say, who we are, what we do, the services we provide, and how we relate to First Nations communities. I'm the inspector that does most of the inspections, save for a few on the James Bay coast. I do all the other communities, flying communities up north. And just a little background, if you're following along in the binders there, I've been in the electrical trade for almost 43 years, and started with the old Ontario Hydro in 1968, 69, and I've been using or servicing First Nations communities for about 22 years, flying up and doing electrical inspections. And we're going to go through this presentation, and it's a generic presentation. It's not tailored for First Nations communities. Because we're a legislative delegated authority, there's certain aspects of this presentation that you're going to find surprising. You're going to find, and I'll explain it as we go along, on how we work with First Nations communities, even though we're provincial regulated, okay? Don't panic. I'll explain it away as we go along. And I encourage everybody here to ask questions whenever they want. Stop me. If there's something in here that you don't understand, or you want some further explanations, please just stop me and ask me the question, and we'll do the best to answer it. What we're going to talk about today is ESA, Electrical Safety Authority, supporting Ontario's electrical system through safety perspectives. The presentation will increase the participants' awareness of who the Electrical Safety Authority is, the services we provide, how to apply for an inspection, scheduling an inspection requirements, the Ontario Electrical Safety Code, residential installation requirements, which is what mostly pertains to you people, and training and programs. That's what we're going to yak about today. Who is ESA? ESA was formerly Ontario Hydroelectrical Inspection, and that's where I started many years ago. On April 1st, 1999, if you recall, Ontario Hydro, through government legislation, was split up, and there were 5 successor companies from within the old Ontario Hydro that now have their own basically little companies like Hydro One, Remote Communities, Hydro One Networks, Ontario Power Generation, the producers and all that, and electrical inspection. So we went off from the old Ontario Hydro umbrella and became a separate company. It's involved, has evolved to maintain electrical inspection and introduce new regulations and services to meet the broader electrical safety needs of Ontarians. And ESA works with safety partners to identify new services and approaches that respond to the changing environment, technological risk assessment, and all that kind of stuff. And that's basically what we do. We are primarily public electrical safety in the province of Ontario. I'm just going to leave that as a broad term, and how we fit in with First Nations communities. I'll explain that as we go along. Where we get our authority, or where we get our purpose from the government, is we're a designated administrative authority. And what that is the government has legislations under the Electricity Act, and that's, for the whole province of Ontario, except for First Nations communities. And because they can't physically, as part of the government, do all those inspections themselves, they delegate that authority to ESA. So they have the legislation, that's the provincial government legislation, and they took all that and they said, you guys can go and do all the electrical inspections in the province of Ontario. And that's any electrical installations that's done in the province. There's a responsibility that we do an inspection on that to make sure it's electrically safe. We're accountable to a board of directors and to the Ontario Ministry of Consumer Services. So there's the ministry that sort of is the custodian of the Act, and we are delegated by them to perform our services in the province. We're a standalone, financially self-sustaining, not-for-profit corporation. So we don't get any funding from the provincial government at all. Our funding comes from permit fees that are taken out by the applicants, the ones that require inspections. We're responsible for administrating regulations that relate to public electrical safety. Again, here's the regulation part of it that applies throughout the province. Our mandate includes administrating a set of regulations that include the Ontario Electrical Safety Code, and that's a code that's produced, it was produced back in 1919, where it started off, and it's evolved through time as part of a regulation, and you'll see the regulation number there, and that's just the number is the regulation number, and the last two numbers that you see in your bindings there is the year it was produced. So when we became ESA in '99, there was a new set of regulations that gave us the mandate to do that. So the Electrical Safety Code, I should have brought them, I didn't, because if somebody wants to see what it looks like, see me after the presentation, and I'll show you. It's a book, and the book is full of rules and regulations that govern the installation of electrical equipment in the province of Ontario. We also have licensing. It's a fairly new regulation. You can see it was done in 2005. And what the government decided to do to protect the public was to ensure anybody that does work as a service, in other words, gets paid for it, was properly licensed and trained in order to do so in the province of Ontario. So anybody doing work on any installation in Ontario, other than his own residence, has to be a licensed contractor. That's the law. I remember when this came about, I became an electrician in 1973 and I became a master electrician in 1983. And in '05, when this came about, I was the examiner and licensor, because it used to be a municipal bylaw that you had to be a master electrician and a contractor, a licensed contractor. I did most of the training for those people that didn't have the luxury of having their masters, and it was required at the time. So I did a lot of the training for contractors, existing contractors, to get their master's license and in time become licensed contractors. Electrical distribution, what that is we have a stake in ensuring that licensed utilities that are licensed through the Ontario Energy Board, which in other words Hydro One and Thunder Bay Hydro and all those people that provide overhead distribution to the communities, follow a set of regulations. Okay? In other words, they adopt a standard that's acceptable through their license, and we make sure that they follow that standard. Product safety, what that is we are responsible to act on behalf of CSA. We have the authority and the training to provide a service that if you're bringing in something that's not approved, in other words, CSA or equivalent, there's a lot of certification agencies, we can do an inspection on that, put our label on it, and it's as good as having a CSA approved piece of equipment. Huge part of our business recently, because we're getting a lot of offshore, what we call counterfeit or bogus products, and they do cause a lot of concern in electrical safety, because if they fail, they could, in fact, electrocute you or cause a fire to burn your asset. What we do as part of our mandate is identify and target leading causes of electrical risk. We take an analysis of what's happening out in the marketplace there for the installations, and we try and provide a service to mitigate some of those happenings that are happening on an everyday basis. So that would be electrical installations, product approvals, and all of that stuff. The other thing that we're mandated to do is enforce a set of regulations related to electrical safety, and that's the code. The code's a legal document, and we make sure that whoever's installing electrical equipment, regardless of where it is or how it's produced, we make sure that that thing is installed properly. We investigate fatalities, injuries, fire losses associated with electricity. So if there's a fire in a house or a business, and usually the first people on the scene are the fire services, Thunder Bay Fire, for example, or whoever in the town that they're in, or the Ministry of Labor. If they suspect it's electrical, they'll call us and we'll do a subsequent follow-up investigation to see what the actual cause of the fire was. Educating, electrical safety regulations, safe use of electricity, use of unsafe electrical products and installations. So we have an education our part of our business where we provide training or education mostly to those people that work in the electrical industry. You know, in your case, it would be the band electricians or contractors coming in from other places. We ensure that they have the proper training in order to make these installations. Just a little side note, I've been trying this for years. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time. And my passion for working on First Nations communities is to bring the level, code recognition and safety level of First Nation band electricians up to a standard where I feel comfortable that they can conduct themselves in a safe installation manner. I would say 90% of the people on First Nations communities who work do excellent work. They really are. I've taken people from outside, First Nations, most of the people from Toronto, and I've taken them up there and they're amazed at the quality of work that's been produced. And that's attributed to usually Chief of Council ensuring that their housing coordinators ensure that their band electricians are at least brought up to speed and do nice, neat, safe work. And they do. The only reason I get involved is, or I get concerned, is we have code changes every 3 years. There's a cycle, 3-year cycle for the code book, and it takes me a long time to get the First Nations electricians up to the current code standards. So this year, what I'm trying to do is head it off May 1st or April 1st, I can't remember which date. There's a new code going into effect, and I've got a training exercise that's being produced right now, another PowerPoint plus hands-on training for all the First Nations electricians. And I want to try and get out there and get them up to speed just as fast as everybody else in the province. So that's one of the initiatives that I'm going to be taking on in the next few months. Advancing the safety system through supporting standards development, working in conjunction with other safety organizations. We work very close with the Ministry of Labor. That doesn't involve too much with the First Nations communities, but we also, what I do up there, I take that and I say, okay, who are the best people to work with? Well, obviously, it's the Chief of Council. I've got good relationships with the majority of the First Nations communities up there. They know what I do for a living, and they know it's the success rate has been phenomenal over the last 15 years on the relationship between ESA and the band council, and the housing coordinators, and of course the electricians. Just a little background, 70% of all electrical incidents can be attributed to 5 key harms. And that's something we use now as sort of a buzzword to identify different aspects of the industry, to identify what these happenings are that cause electrical incidents, whether it's fire or shock or whatever. So we've lumped it all into 5 key areas there where we've identified that they are the highest risk to housing, like I say, electrocutions. And ESA has addressed the need for solutions to reduce this harm from electrical accidents. So we sort of divided our corporation into different areas where we have harm prevention, mitigation, and all. So I belong to the harm prevention part, which is a pre-training, trying to head these things off before they happen. And that's part of the training, the education on site. My struggle always has been, I think I've got 43 communities I'm responsible for, is to ensure that all 43 communities' electrical representation, the electricians on site, are managed properly so that they do a safe installation. ESA, to ensure that success, engages stakeholders to leverage the power working together. I work closely with Hydro One. They're the major supplier distribution authority in the north, even though neither one of us has any regulatory authority for sake of it being federal land. And I got to mention now that all this stuff about the regulations and that I work under really means nothing in First Nations communities because I don't have the regulatory authority up there. Most of my successes have been through coaching and mentoring, and that's usually Chief of Council or housing coordinators, electricians or whoever. I just show them the way that they should be doing things so that they can do a safe install. I have some limited authority out there, and that's for people that are not part of the band, not band members, like Northern Star, for example. I can go in and basically, force them to work more responsibly. ESA works with stakeholders to ensure public electrical safety. Again, that would be, in my case, that would be with the Chief of Council, safety partners, electrical trades. There's other trades that I get involved with. Civil trades sometimes interfere with the electrical distribution on assets, and mostly in commercial. And I work with them to try and make sure that they don't do that. Local distribution companies, one of my big challenges right now is I think the last count was there's 13 what we call independents. And that's local distribution companies in communities that aren't serviced by a licensed OE distributor. And the infrastructure that we deal with, when I first started doing this, I was right on the tail end of people being electrified. In other words, distribution, New Wave did a few that were brand new out of the box. They never had distribution before. They were always working on their own little generators. Now that's been about 35 or 40 years for most communities. And what we're finding now is the age of that infrastructure is starting to crumble a bit. And I've been, one of my passions and one of my jobs that has been elected from Indian Affairs through the Banding Council and Hydro One is periodically when there's a transfer of assets, and that's when the community decides they don't want to look after it anymore, and they're hiring Hydro One to come in and look after the distribution. I'm sort of the guy in the middle, the independent, and I go and do an audit. So I'll drive around the community. I did Katanchikam last year. It took me 7 or 8 days on site. And I'll do an audit of their distribution to let everybody know what the condition is. So I work with the local distribution companies, and what that means here, what it means to you people is the independents. Okay? They're not licensed. They're not really, legally a distribution company, but they look after their own generating station. They look after their own distribution. Usually contract any of the repairs out. And all I ask the band to do is get me involved to make sure that whoever the contract to do the distribution work, that they call me, and I'll go and have a look to make sure that they're following a set of standards. Electrical manufacturers doesn't mean a lot to you people, but I keep an eye on if you're buying packages for whether it's residential, commercial, that the package comes in, that all the components that come in are approved by a recognized certification agency, NACSA, ETL. There's a whole pile of them. I just take a look at the equipment and make sure. Certification bodies, again, basically the same thing. Consumers and homeowners, the odd time, every once in a while, they go on this, like the energy conservation. Right now, Hydro One has bring a refrigerator in and give them the old one and all that kind of stuff. And all I do is, when I find out about that stuff, I fire them off a quick email saying, please ensure that what you're sending them is compatible with what they need, and also that it's approved. ESA has a vision and a mission, and it's just a statement that we make so people can recognize that we've got a goal, we've got a purpose, we want to look forward and have sort of a purpose at the end of the day, whatever that is, that we've done something and it's a measurable sort of accomplishment. And the vision is Ontario, free of electrical fatalities, serious damage, injury, and loss. And the mission is to improve electrical safety for the well-being of people in Ontario, and that includes First Nations communities. Some of the services that ESA provides, our prime activity, of course, is electric wiring inspection. So any new wiring done, any alterations or something like that, our legislation says that if you do wiring on anything, any asset, it doesn't matter whether it comes from a distribution, like a community distribution, or it's from a generator, solar, wind, it's still producing the same voltage, so we have to have them involved in that. And our code book deals with all the different types of distribution that's being produced that we have to look at. General inspections, what those are a fitness report. We'll do a general inspection on an asset before in your case, might be for the band, it might be for an individual that requires power and disconnected for whatever reason. We have to do general inspection. The utilities require that to make sure that the place is fit before they go down. Inspection certificates, that's produced at the tail end or at the end of whatever we do, a wire inspection general or whatever. You get a certificate. It's a legal document that should be retained, stored someplace, that an inspection has taken place and we are either happy with it or not happy with it. And it's just a validation of what we do. Unapproved electrical products, again, we talked about that, and that's the product that's coming into Ontario that has to be approved, has to carry some certification mark. Continuous safety services, a big part of our business, not so much up north. And what that is we take, I'll give you an example of some of the ones that I do up north. I do the Ministry of Transport, the airports, and that's where the MTO has signed a contract with us and pays us a fee based on how many places I look at every year. And I do a walkthrough of all the airports, all the terminals, all the waiting rooms, their living quarters and all that stuff, or any other buildings that they've got up there on an annual basis to check to make sure it's still at a level of fitness. That's, it's a huge part of our business here down in what I call, outside the First Nations. But the other one that probably not aware of, and this is if there's anybody here from technical divisions, from Tribal Council technical divisions, plan review. We have a level where if anything over 400 amp three-phase power or 600 amp single-phase power, it's a required by law for those who produce drawings, usually for commercial work and that. They must have a review of the plan, so they have to submit the drawings to us. We take a look at them, mark down the errors if there's any errors. To the drawings before it even gets into the field. And it's really a good thing to do because you don't want to get the construction either quarter, half, or 3/4 of the way through the project and then find out. I go on site as a wiring inspector and find all kinds of flaws in the design package or whatever. So we do usually it's a pre-construction plan review. We send it back to the engineers and we tell them, no, you can't do this, or you should take a look at doing this. What I do up north, I take a look at that system, and the plans are still submitted, and I get the plans. What I like to do is work with the chief of council or whoever's in charge, could be a project coordinator, and take a look at it and say, okay, the drawings are good, you can go ahead with the project, but here's a cheaper way to do it, without coming in conflict with the code. That's something I like to do for the local bands. I just take a look at the drawings and say, I'll give you an example. It's been driving me nuts for over 20 years that every house, when I started doing this, every house in the north had 200 amp service. And there's no way that any house, even in Thunder Bay, unless it's 7,000 or 8,000 square feet, requires a 200 amp service. What happens when you buy the packages? Usually that's what's dictated from the housing guy, whoever's selling it, or is a decision by the band. And they say, yeah, we want a 200 amp service, we want to make sure we've got enough power. The mistake that's made there is, if you go to your service provider, it could be Hydro One or it could be your own independent power provider, and you're building 10 houses, that's 2,000 amps. And when you take 2,000 amps on a subdevelopment or something like that, and then you start sizing the transformers, things on the pole that supplies power to the houses, you're going to find that the cost of the distribution is horrendous as opposed to, do you really need all that power? Do you need that potential, for those 10 houses? And what I've been telling the bands to do and the electricians is, instead of going to 200 amp, and 100 might be a little low in their minds, go to 125 amp. The wire is the same as 100 amp. All the equipment's the same. The only thing you're getting when you put a panel in a house is you're getting 125, rather than 100, which gives you 25 more amps. And I always use the rationale that whoever's moving into that house, middle age, whatever, and he spends 20 years in that house, sooner or later he becomes an elder. I know a lot of you people, there are a lot of First Nations communities rely on wood heat, to save costs and all that stuff. You get to the age where you don't have the ability to go out and cut 10 cords of wood every year, so then you can use some electric heat within the house. And that, even though it's costly to do that, I mean, it may be a necessity. So at 125 amps, you still have the ability to put up to 15 kilowatts, which is a lot of people. 15 kilowatts would run any house in Thunder Bay. 15 kilowatts of heat in a house on electric service. You don't have that 200 where the initial cost is going to drive you out of the marketplace, yet you still got the capacity in the house. So, and that alone would save you about $2,500 per house. Just on the equipment and the install, plus the infrastructure to supply the power to that house. And that's just that's a low ball guess. So, it's got that kind of stuff that I like to, get out to the First Nations communities. Record searches, we provide that service, doesn't mean much to you people. That's just, if somebody wants to search a house, they can call us and do a record search. There may be some freedom of information criteria there, but we can handle that. ESA offers Ontario Electrical Safety Code related services that include the Ontario Electrical Safety Code and bulletins. We have the code, it's produced every 3 years, like I mentioned before. And periodically we come up with bulletins, and that is small changes to the code that have come usually because of technological changes. They come out in between those 3-year cycles, and they're as binding as the code is, outside of the community, First Nations community, but it's just something so we don't have to keep reproducing the code all the time. It's just a little interim bulletin that comes out to tell you that there's been some changes. Electrical safety and technical training, as I mentioned before, one of my initiatives is to make sure that we've got band electricians up to the same level as everybody else in the province. We have online technical frequently asked question database. One thing I encourage those who have the ability to, or the facilities to get online, look at our website. It's very informative. It's a navigational, not nightmare, but challenge. But once you get into where you want to go, we have a lot of really good information in there. And we also have Ask the Technical Expert at tutorials. And what that is it's a sort of a production that we come up with about every month, and it's based on concerns we've had in the industry and questions that have been asked and technological changes. One of the big technological changes we've got going on right now, of course, is solar power. Everybody seems to be jumping all over solar power, and when they came out with that, there was no real concern or worry about how does that relate to public electrical safety. So we've had a lot of catch up to do in trying to make rules or guidelines for the installation of solar power. Because at the end of the day, I mean, sure, the sun's producing 12 volts at 2 amps, but it's inverted into your household current, so it's still coming in at 125 volts. So we've got some concerns there. One of our big, I would say 25 or 30% of the current code changes that are going to be instituted in April are dealing with solar power. As mentioned before, we like to work with stakeholders to advance electrical safety awareness and safe work practices. Annual public awareness campaigns are conducted to raise consumer risk aware by sharing electrical safety information and tips. One of the big issues that we've had in the last few years, and it's we're concentrating on strongly, is overhead power lines. And it doesn't matter if it's a First Nations community or right outside this door. We've got real concerns over, like I mentioned before, aged infrastructure where the poles are rotting and lines aren't being maintained properly, and children, flying kites, I sort of gave it, throwing their running shoes over the lines, all that kind of stuff. We're getting concerned that all the infrastructure is getting to the age where we've got a concern that it hasn't been properly maintained and upgraded. To protect, run in the communities, usually independents, where their process, like say they have a house fire, their process is shut the community down, go and cut the triplex, which is the wires going to the house, coil it up and tap it to the pole. Well, that's okay if it's out of reach, because those are live conductors. And the only protection in front of that is the fuse on the transformer on the 25,000 volt side. my concern is that it's within reach. If it's in reach of children, I really get upset. So I usually go right straight to the band and tell them, either hike it up, in and out of, isolate it by elevation, or get somebody in to have it cut right off. Increase consumer awareness of the requirements and benefits of using licensed electrical contractors. I sort of got my foot in each camp here. I strongly believe licensed electrical contractors benefit, but I also believe that with training, and we're talking about residential here, I still have a preference that band electricians do their own. I'm trying to get eventually. I don't think I've got a long enough career to see it through now. I've talked to several people that are involved with First Nations training. I would like, my wish list would be, my passion would be to have First Nations band electrician carry some kind of certification with them like I do my license. It may not look the same as the license I've got, because it's sort of a broader spectrum for licensed electricians, but there is a way of having them trained, tested, and certified to do what they do, which is housework. And I'd like to see some kind of a program where they'll carry this certificate or license so they can, basically show anybody. Like if I got run over by a bus and another inspector got it there, he can show them, look, I've been trained and certified, proctored by ESA or whoever, that I've taken training and have been successful in completing an apprenticeship. And I'm certified electrician for doing work on residential. That's one thing I've always wanted to get, but it's really tough to get people to think about it and do it. Remind the public, higher risk, look up, look out. That's the overhead distribution I was telling about. And don't work live. That's one of the big initiatives we've got here with the electricians, down in cities and whatnot. Is there's an old, and I'm guilty of it, just the same as anybody else. There's an old trait that we had. Don't bother shutting the power off. It's too inconvenient to go work live. Well, we're killing people left and right. I got two sons that are electricians, and I pound it into them every day. Don't work live. Shut the power off when you're making the repairs. Turn the power back on when you're done. ESA produces an annual editions of the Electrical Safety Report. I had some at my booth there yesterday. It's pretty good reading if you're into justifying the statistics on how many electrical fires there are and how many electrocutions there are. One of the products we've come out in the last few years is that tamper-resistant receptacle. You probably all saw it. And the results, or the reason that came out, and it's a good technology as long as the arc bulb, which protects your bedroom circuits from arcing appliances. The tamper-resistant, 1,200 kids under the age of 5 were killed in 1 year by sticking things in plugs. It was a statistic that came out. We weren't watching it that closely, and all of a sudden, this is an American statistic, by the way. And they came along and said, we got to do something about this. So somebody invented the plug where you can't stick one thing in the plug. You need to have the whole appliance stick in before the shutters will open and allow you to stick it in. Great technology. The report is compiled using incident data from a number of sources. Data analysis is augmented by root cause investigations. We do that. We take a look at whatever incidents are happening repetitively, like the working light, kids being killed, usually apprentices on 600 volt lighting. Sometimes they don't recognize the voltage levels. So we do an analysis. We go into each and every incident and say, okay, why did this happen? Something I've been trying to get on First Nations communities. Some people have fire investigators through the tribal council, some people don't. And I've always been bugging them and say, if you know the cause of the fire, fine. If you don't know the cause of the fire, give me a call. A lot of times it's too late. It's 2 or 3 weeks later. The house is right into the hole, into the basement. There's not much I can do, but if you got one that's been caught, fire's been suppressed, and they don't know the root cause. In other words, it's not an overheated wood stove, or somebody leaving something on an element on the stove, or kids playing with matches or arson. I mean, those are the big ones I can't do anything about. But if there's something happened to that house, and I get in there and determine that it's been electrical cause, now I've got, some tangible evidence to do a root cause analysis, which I would produce and share with all the other communities. These are the key areas that we've been focusing on, and we will be focusing on going forward for the next couple of years: power line safety and distribution, high-risk worker safety, and that's the working life thing. Electrical product safety, that's counterfeit and bogus stuff that's coming into Ontario. Aging infrastructure, something that First Nations communities should be cognizant of. Like some of the houses are getting old. They need to be fixed. I find that they're very reluctant to do that. They're usually just replacing them and abandon them. And that's your choice. All I'm saying is, if the house is getting to the point where it becomes a hazard, somebody has to address that. And one of the things I've been involved with, I'm supplying whoever wants one, whether it's a housing coordinator, band electrician, with a little polarity tester. It's just a little device we use to check polarity in the plugs. It does a little circuit analysis there. And I encourage all the housing coordinators in the communities, they don't have to do it all at once, but just keep an eye on some of the houses that are getting tired. Make a report, send it to me, and I can go up and take a look at it from an electrical perspective and say, yeah, it should be worked out. It's not just new housing, it's renovating and fixing up older housing. That's the aging infrastructure. There's a real concern about that. And of course, new wiring. Here's some of the requirements. Again, it's not binding on First Nations communities. An application, any electrical inspection required for any new electrical installation. That's any wiring at all. Application can be made up to 48 hours after the commencement of work. Certain exemptions exist. There is some changes coming up in the new code where there's going to be an increase in the basic exemption. An example would be a homeowner changing a light fixture. But do we really need to go look at that? So that wouldn't require homeowners are not to take out applications for contractors. And I tell the bands this all the time. If you're hiring somebody from outside the community to come in, I don't want the band to take out the inspection permits on their behalf. I'm a strong believer of he who does the work is responsible for the work. So I drill it and drill it and drill it into them. And if there's a guy coming from Kenora, Sulako, Manitoba, make him take the permits out. Because if I find deficiencies there, I want him to be responsible, not the band. Inspection fees, that's how we get our money. Charge for inspection and other services. You can go on our website to find out exactly what the fees are. It's a little bit higher in the north for obvious reasons. I can't fly charter, I can't fly sked, I have to fly charter because of the frequency of inspections. So the cost, and you people know what the cost is in living up there and what it costs to do work up there. It costs me about $5,000 or $6,000 a day, and the average permit up there is about $500. So we don't make a lot of money on this, but I've convinced our people that it's necessary. There's a high risk, even though we don't have the regulatory authority. Our mandate still is to provide a service to the people of Ontario. So, that covers our operating expenses, safety investigations, and it supports education. Like we have to pay for all this training. It costs a lot of money for this presentation. I've been working on this thing for a year, and it's generic, so it can be used anywhere. But I just got it about 3 weeks ago, and it was not, it's expensive to have this stuff produced. So like I say, if you want to look at the fee structure, it's on our website, and it'll give you a breakdown. There is a little blurb in our fee guide that remote communities, there's a travel component, so you sort of know that going on. But in comparison to other inspection agencies, we are relatively inexpensive. Application for inspection can be obtained by contacting. Again, our website is www.esa.com. You see it at the bottom here. There's our number, 1-877-ESA-SAFE or 372-7233. You phone that number, it's a one-stop shop. You just tell them who you are, where you're from, and what you want, and they'll, navigate you to the right department. Again, electrical inspection can be scheduled by calling ESA at the same number. Like I say, it's a one-stop shop. The inspections may involve a number of visits at various stages, and that could be underground. Don't have a lot of underground up there, it's mostly overhead. Service inspection, that gets power to the residents. Rough-in inspection, that's when all the wiring's been done but not covered yet. That's when we like to see it before it's covered. Not much to see if you've got all the wall work. And of course, the final inspection. It could be any one of those or all of them. What I try to promote is, if you're doing a house, wiring a new house, the first thing you should have in there is your service. And that gives you power to work. You build a house, the carpenters frame it, electricians go in to start doing the wiring on it. The first thing that should be put in is the service. That's the incoming power from the utility to get power to the residents. You do not have to have the roughing done at the same time. We will go up and do service, get your power so your workers have power to work with. You know, rather than stringing cords all over the place from another residence, you can get power to that building before the rough. We prefer to go up there, again, because of the cost and my availability to do the rough and service at the same time. That's the ideal. So, before inspection, ensure that the electrical installation complies with the code, and that's a training issue again. Provide the ESA at least 48 hours notice for inspection. With me, it's a little bit longer because I have to schedule flights, and what I try to do is as many as I can, say in a 12-hour day, and that keeps our costs down and it helps you. But I had an awful struggle with our people. About 5 years ago, I came up with a plan. I used to be the supervisor here. I gave that up 3 years ago, and all I really do now is everything that's non-mandated by code. I do First Nations communities, telecommunications, which is Sunday telephone, Hydro One. These are all people that are exempt from the code, and the Ministry of Transport. Okay. What I like to do, like I was saying, is get as many in a day as possible. And I know it's agonizing sometimes when you phone me up and say, I need this done because I'm holding up the drywallers and I'm holding up this and that. I'll try my best to get there within that week. 7 days, 7 calendar days or 5 working days. That's if you don't phone me though, I don't know. So if the housing coordinator or whoever's doing the scheduling doesn't phone and we don't know about it, really it's tough to hold us accountable for holding the workers up there. But I will try to get up there as fast as I can. Usually I fly up on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Fridays. Fridays I like to stay away from because I've got caught up there a few times, never got home. But Tuesdays or Wednesdays are the 2 days that I like to fly. So keep that in mind if you're scheduled, because I have to stay away from Mondays and Thursdays because I use Hydro One's flight arrangements. I try and hitch rides with them to get the same cost. Electrical installations are not to be concealed or rendered inaccessible. And that's the covering up thing before I get to see it. There's not much for me to look at or criticize the electricians or give them some guidance if I can't see it. So try and get me up there before you want to hang the drywall. We have a code of conduct. It's something that comes, it's the nature of the beast that because we're a public servant, essentially, we have a code of conduct and we have to stick by that. If we don't stick by that, we're not long in this job. So I use the adage that, if it tastes like it, it looks like it, and I always tell my inspectors when I was a supervisor here, if there's any inkling in the back of your head that something's not right here, it usually isn't. So we work by a code of conduct. It's pretty stringent. We work to the letter of the law. Respect for all. Doesn't matter where you're from or what you're doing. Avoid conflicts of interest. Appropriate personal conduct. And portray the values and principles of the ESA Code of Conduct. It's about a 2-page document, some of the stuff that we got from or follow. After the inspection is done, check the status of the inspection. You'll get a certificate after every inspection is done. We'll tell you it's a rough-in or final or service or whatever. And keep those copies. It's good records. If defected, written report is available, and you'll get that on this updated certificate if I find a deficiency in there. I quote the rule number, and usually for First Nations, I quote the rule number, and then I also give an explanation. Because they're not licensed contractors, they're not cognizant of all the verbiage in the code rule. So it'll say, ground fault doesn't trip when tested. That's the little ground faults in the bathroom or outside the house. I'll go on to explain where it is and what's happening. And it's usually like a custom text in the permit. Remedy all defects in a timely manner, schedule re-inspection. So whenever you get a deficiency, it's my option on whether I want to re-inspect it or not. A lot of times I'll use photographs. People take pictures and send it to me. And again, it's just a convenience because it costs so much money to go out there. If it's a serious defect, though, I will revisit the site. And that can be done at any time. Residential installation requirements. This is just an overview of what's required in every residence. Our arc fault circuit interrupters for sleeping areas. So this new arc fault technology, what it is, it's incorporated into the breaker, which is in the panel, and that senses usually any appliance or that you've got in the bedrooms. And that could be a table lamp, electric blanket, a radio, whatever you've got in there. And there's a little bit of an arc. Sometimes you've got an old fixture, you go turn the light on, you get this little arcing and sparking in there. This thing won't tolerate that, it'll shut the power off. It's a good safety valve. I've done a lot of fatality investigations where an appliance is the cause of the fire. It could be an extension cord that people have been walking on for years, and it just gets to the point where it fails. If it's plugged into the bedroom circuits, that arc fault breaker will trip. Tamper-resistant receptacle, we talked about that. That's the one where you can't stick one thing in it, mainly for children. Outdoor receptacles require weatherproof covers for obvious reasons. You don't want to plug outside without a cover on it to keep all the elements out of it. Receptacles as prescribed for electrical vehicle charging system. I don't know if you guys have seen that for a while. I know I will. And that's for electric cars. It's new technology. So now we have to, the charger for those cars, we've come up with a set of rules to make it safe so when people plug the cars in to recharge the batteries, it's not safe. Receptacles requirements for the kitchen. Refrigerator must be on a separate circuit. The gas range, if you have one, I think Muskrat now has a lot of propane. And now if they were building that, we're going to use propane, you still have to put a receptacle there where the range is, usually for the control of the range. Countertops, island or peninsula. So on the countertops, there's specific requirements for what kind of receptacles need to be there and the proximity to a sink. Okay, they have to be ground fault. Receptacles are not mounted face up in a work surface. Well, you don't see a lot of that out there. A lot of people like to do that on islands, so they come out the plug flat on the work area there. We won't allow that because of all the crud that goes into the receptacles. Ground fault circuit interrupters, that's the little ground fault things that you're all familiar with. Within 1.5 meters of sink or wash basins, within 2.5 meters of grate. What that means outside, if there's any receptacles, and there is a requirement for receptacle inside, from 2.5 meters down must be ground fault. And that's for electrical lawnmowers. It was mainly developed for pools, but it works rather well if you've got, even if you're working outside, working on your car, skidoo or whatever, that if you've got a damp location or a tool that's not right up the snuff, it's got a ratty core or something, and this ground fault, save your life. For submersible pumps in lakes, rivers, and streams. Circuit requirements, refrigerators, laundry rooms must have their own circuit. Utility rooms must have their own circuit. A microwave have its own circuit. Central vacuums, electrical charging system. Those are all small single receptacles that are provided that must be on their own circuit, and nothing else should be on that circuit. We offer a broad selection of safety training, including workplace electrical safety, and that's mainly for workers. It doesn't have to be electricians, it could be any staff in an industrial environment. Control of hazardous energy, occupational health and safety. We teach all that. We have modules to teach all that. If it's not available, in your case, I'm there all the time, but if you wanted to give occupational health and safety talk, you can't have a Ministry of Labor guy up there. We can provide electrical safety awareness. It's not a bad program. We give that to people that are not in the trade. It's just an awareness for people that are working in an office environment of that, what to be aware of in your environment. And that's usually power cords, extension cords, all that kind of stuff. Protection against available fault current. That's more of an industrial application than residential. We offer technical training on Ontario Electrical Safety Code. There'll be a whole pile of training coming up because there's the new code coming up. Pre-master electrician. That's people that are licensed electricians that want to be a master electrician in order to get into business. We provide the training for that. Get years and years and years of that. On conductors, we provide training, grounding and bonding, solar, photovoltaic installations, solar, residential installations. That's coming soon. That's what I'm talking about. This is one that I've developed. I've got a training facilitator now putting it into an orderly package so that I can go to the tribal councils or the band or wherever and say, here it is. Here's what it looks like. We need to train your electricians to bring them up to current code standards. Training is offered on the interactive classroom, this environment, online. You can go to our website and take some training online. And independent self-study. We supply the materials, mail it to you or whatever, and you can go through this thing and it's proctored or evaluated every so often. Eventually you get to where you want to go. Products or programs offered, we talked about the continuous safety services. That's where we take an organization in. And I've often thought about asking bands if they would like to elect to go to this thing. And with that, I call the band run assets. Would be the band office, could be the schools, in some cases the hospitals, band garage, whatever facilities have got that have power in it. We could come along periodically, say once a year, or twice a year, or whatever. And do an audit. We just go in there and look at stuff that's going to beat to death. The garages are usually the worst culprits because they get beat to death. We just go in and give them a list of things, prioritize it, and say this is what you should be fixing immediately. This is what you should be looking within the next current year. Electrical safety plan doesn't really apply to you people. That's a plan where we take a lot of their staff electricians and the housing or commercial and give them a plan. It's like a safety committee of the electric. Authorized contractor program, that's a program we have that recognizes through training and application of licensed contractors that get a preferred status with us. So if he's been defect-free, made the application, taken all the appropriate training, we give him a designation and an actual number as an ACP contractor, so he can come up and do work on assets, doesn't matter if it's up north or down here, and get the benefits of not having to have us looking over his left shoulder. He gets a pre-authorized, we do the inspection still, but it's to the point where we're not holding anybody up, because he's authorized to go in there and have power delivered to the building. His say-so, and he's registered with all the utilities. To have that done prior to us coming. We usually do a follow-up inspection whenever we can get there. Okay, this is just sort of encapsulates what we talked about. We talked about who we are, our vision and mission statements, inspection, application, and scheduling, residential installations and training programs. That's us in a nutshell. It's a big mandate, but what I do, what we do in the north, it's sort of condensed into a small, neat little package. I do a lot more coaching and mentoring in the north than I do, pushing the buttons to get things done. I rely heavily on the band council, to support what we do up there. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be in business too long. ESA's mission to improve electrical safety for the well-being of Ontario. Really, in a nutshell, even though we have the authority outside of First Nations communities, we're still a public safety. We still, like most inspectors, 90% of our inspectors, still like to give advice. This is not the way you want to do, this is the way you should be doing it. And I go a little bit further by saying this is what you don't want to do electrical safety-wise, plus you don't want to do this because it's going to cost you too much money. Role of ESA to enhance public electrical safety awareness. Responsible for administering specific regulations related to electrical safety. And that's not just contractors working in your communities or others. Like I say, use a Northern Store Lot or MTO. Again, it's the one of my big passions recently has been the overhead distribution infrastructure. It is starting to cause me concern. We work extensively with stakeholders, that's you people, to educate, train, promote, and foster electrical safety. Whatever you want electrically, if you've got a concern, if I can't deal with it under my mandate, I'm sure I can find somebody who can. Don't forget our website. It's worth wandering around in there when you've got some time. Harm Reduction Services, that's me. 1-877-ESA for their toll-free, one-stop shop. And I thank you. Any questions? Two.
Who lets after like Hydro One, like they're doing an extension on our line?
Mm-hmm.
Do you inspect their work? Like
No, I don't inspect their work. What I do is a periodic audit. I get about 8 or 10 a year, and I pick new construction, like if it's Weatherquake, we're going to do some work in Weatherquake on extending the line or whatever they do. I'll go up there under the utility regulations part of our mandate. And I'll take a look at what I do is to make sure that they're following their standards. Their standards have been developed, and Hydro's really good at it because they wrote the book. They've been doing business ever since there's been electricity. And a lot of other utilities follow their standards, but what they must do is follow their own standards. So if they say this is what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, and that's an acceptable standard, what I do is go up there and make sure that they follow it. If they don't follow that, I make a report out. I send it to our utility regulations sort of overseers in our office in Toronto, and then they deal with the utility. But the way I work, I'll send that report in, but usually I've already talked to the director over here and said, you can't do that. It's not your standard. You've done something goofy. Don't do that. And no one fix it. But no, they don't take permits. They take permits out for anything other than their distribution. Like if they, for example, because I have a contract with them, if they do wiring work in their generating station, if they put a house in, because they have houses all over the north that their staff stays in, they take permits up for that. Because they don't see that, or I don't see it either, as part of the distribution. This is something that you would take a permit out for if you put it in. And what I explained to them, I'm the only one that gets that from them, but if they do work up there, or if they do work on behalf of the band, on something private, like example would be Sandy Lake. A couple of years ago, they had their celebrations there, and they did some work for Sandy Lake First Nations. But it was more of not a distribution part. It wasn't part of the network. It was just like a favor to them to get their celebrations. They put some poles in and did some electrical work, and they took permits on that. I go and inspect that, I approve it. Or if I find something wrong, I give them a defect, same as I would any contractor. So there's their part of it, which is exempt from code, but they're obliged to follow a standard under the utility regs. And then if they step over the line and do stuff on private assets, they have to take a permit on it anyway.
What about, you're talking about the infrastructure, the poles and whatnot. What happens when, on our First Nation, we had to regrade our roads, like build up some gravel and everything, and built our roads up so we could conquer ditching. And now all the lines are too short.
Too low. It's a real issue. If that's causing you concern, like we have in our section 75 of the code, we're the only province in Canada that has a rural distribution code. In other words, if you built it as a private contractor, you've got to take a permit up and follow those regulations. There's a minimum height clearance for primary distribution, because that's high voltage, right? And if you've compromised that by building the road up, then the deficiency would be you must meet 6.1 meters, in other words 20 feet, between the lowest point in the line and grade. If you can't do that, then you either got to dig the ground out or hike the poles up.
So what do we do? I mean,
you got to change poles. You're not going to change the road because that was the job in the first place.
Indian Affairs told us we had to build our roads up, we have to do this properly. And now all these poles are too short, so who's responsible?
You are.
We are.
Yeah, if you're in charge of the distribution in that community, or is it
Well, we're
Hydro?
not in charge of Hydro, it's Hydro One that's,
Is it a Hydro One community?
yeah,
And send me an email and I'll make a picture.
Better check that out first.
that's what
Anybody wants, I've got business cards here, if you want to,
Yes, I want one, Bill.
if you want to talk to me,
How
the
do I-
best way to get a hold of
How
me
do
is
I
by,
report an obnoxious hydro inspection?
oh, me?
No, not you.
You wouldn't want the card. You'd probably just meet me out the door.
Normally, Danny and Bruce Forks.
Oh,
He's real nasty.
no, if you've got, sorry, I'll
Really,
use
really
it.
obnoxious.
If you've got concerns over what, INAC or whoever come in and told you you should do this thing, they have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't compromise something else. So if they gave you $1 million to raise the roads up, they better give you 5, because the other 4 is going to be required to raise the lines up, because we won't tolerate. I'm not dealing with the bands now, I'm dealing with land. And not that I like picking fights with them, but, if they've given a work order issue, and this is a problem I have with them constantly, that compromises public safety on distribution or residences or whatever. Which community?
Michigan Overland, awesome.
Osborne. I got involved with them, weekly with my manager, I got a manager, and he sent me an email. I guess somebody called Queen's Park or whatever, or something, I think we talked about this. But, anything to do with remote communities or Indians, they always call me, even though I don't service as Osborne, that's not a drive. And he lit a fire under me, he says, what's going on? And of course they quoted the native thing. And I'm like, that's not mine. I had to look it up on the website. I'm off the hook. I sent it back to him. I can't even remember what the problem was, but it was serious. And I think it was a refusal by Hydro, something to do with doing a connection on something. And everybody was getting pissed off, so they lit a fire. Even if it's not one of my remote communities, you got an issue. I'm about, the most well-versed in dealing with INAC or CMHC or whoever. Navigating, through all the red tape to get something done. I think Don Kuzumchuk is the inspector for Osnabrück.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to Don. He sent me an email to remind me, because I get old, I forget this stuff. Send me an email reminding me, and I'll ask Don what the issue was, and if it's a betterment that was done in the community, civil work that's compromised the utilities, then yeah, we got an issue. And I'll send Hydro right back to INAC saying, okay, you've done this. It's the same as digging a hole beside a pole. You guys put it in for sewer and water or something like that, and then you walk away from that and all the poles fall down. Like, it's not Hydro's fault if they're not aware. But if they're made aware, now they've got a responsibility to me, or ESA, to make sure that's fixed. And the only way they can do that is to go back to INAC or whoever, or the band, and say, hey, we got to, instead of 35 footers, now we got to go put 40-foot poles wherever you guys raise the roof, or 50 footers, or whatever's required. It's talking millions of dollars. But the fact still remains, it's like call before you dig. When they come out with a project like that, they should take a look at it. Like, INAC's got a whole pile of engineers, they should know that it's going to cause some kind of grief to another utility or another entity. So that's the part that I like to tell them. If you've got some issues, think about it before you issue the work order. What are the ramifications going to be to others? Could be Bell, could be Hydro, could be whoever. Anybody else? Come on.
How long does it take to treat a question to be?
How long does it take?
Yeah, treat a question now.
Sorry, I'm getting deaf and related. How long does it take?
So how long does it take to treat a question to be?
Well, it takes 5 years. Normally, that would be like what they call a 309A license, which is the construction and maintenance license in the province of Ontario. I think it's, my 2 kids just went through it, well, I went through it 40-some years ago. But it's about, I think it's 8,000 hours, so that translates into roughly 5 years. But they have another one, I call it the domestic ticket, which is a 442. And that is a residential only I think it's 200 amps and under, single phase, residential only license. And it's an actual license produced by the Ontario government. And I've taken a look at that and the parameters in order to get that thing. It's substantially less time, but it's still a requirement to get that license. That license is good anywhere, on reserve, off reserve, anywhere in the province of Ontario, but you're limited in what you can do. And that was one thing I took a look at years ago. Could we fit First Nations band electricians into that, sort of a little avenue there? And it's doable. I'll say it's not. I mean, you got some pretty smart kids up there. It's just a matter of time and registering them and all that. It's government. And I know how much you people love the government. So when you're registering these things, there's an actual official apprenticeship where there's a counselor that takes on your case and you're registered with him or her. And there's hours that has to be logged into a log sheet on what he's been doing in that community for however many hours. And once he gets up to his 2,000 to 3,000 hours, or whatever it requires for that license, and I'm not sure what it is, then he can write a little test and he gets the license. So I took a look at it and I go, is that going to work? And probably not. You're going to start this thing and even down here in Thunder Bay, if somebody isn't willing to do the administration on that thing, then it's not going to be successful. So I sort of went off, on a tangent there and said, well, ESA is the only one that's concerned about how people conduct themselves electrically on First Nations communities. So can we do something that we recognize, ESA, forget the government, ESA, because we're the inspectors, is there something we can do for these kids to get them some kind of certification so anybody can go up there, take a look at the certificate and say, at least we know he's had training and he's capable of doing things. And that's where I'm going right now. I always find that if you're going to eat an elephant, take that one little bite at a time. Plus, I don't have that many years left to make this thing roll. So that's something I've been, passionate about, is to get these guys at least recognized somewhere, somehow, that they've had some training and they're capable of it. Yes?
Are you also the governing body that we report electricians to?
No. Well, I can't say that right now, but actually right now we're looking at the contractor licensing. I can see there's been a little bit of stall in the government because we've had elections and all that stuff. I would have thought it came sooner than this, but I can see probably within the next couple of years we're already looking after all certified electricians licensed. The Ministry of College and University would do the training. They would do the exam, but as soon as that guy gets his license, then we look after him until he retires.
Who would I talk to?
For band electricians?
We don't have a bad electrician.
Oh.
Contractor electrician.
Okay, contract electricians, you need to talk to them. If you've got issues with that contractor, call them. Even though I don't have the regulatory authority for even being on a First Nations community, like if you push to kick me out, there's nothing I can do. Contractors on a community, I got influence. Because number one, if they're licensed contractors, we hold their license. And no matter where they conduct themselves, there's no difference between doing work in Kenora and doing work in Pacancha. He's still going to have the same quality as long as I'm on the spread. So if you've got an issue with our contractor, send me an email and tell me what your concern is, and believe me, it won't take me long to get it straightened out.
Thanks.
Yes? You don't count.
A lot of houses are going with reversible piping. So how do you ground the electrical system in that case?
Why do you ground the rest of the plate?
You don't have ground the panel that's normally.
Oh yeah, that's what we ground the rest of the plate. We ran into difficulties talking about grounding the electrical system in the house. And in a town where there's a municipal water system and it's metallic, normally copper, our preferred method of grounding is to ground the electrical system to that water line. And we ran into places even here in Thunder Bay. I use Mount Forest as an example. That's the first time I ran into it. We started running plastic lines into the house, but they had a little copper stub and it was only that long joined on with plastic, and we didn't know, so we had a little services ground into that, and then they found out It's all plastic, which means it's a valueless ground. But all electrical systems need to be grounded, number one. That's just the way we operate here in Ontario. And the preferred method for residential, anything up to and including 750 volts, is either one ground plate or two 10-foot, 3-meter ground rails. So it really doesn't matter what the water system is. If you're using a plastic water system, and we've already grounded the service, there's also a code rule that says you have to bond the cold water line in a house to the electrical system. So we don't get the electrical system being electrified and killing some people doing the dishes at night. So that cold water line has to be grounded, but if you're using PEX, it's not metallic, so there's no issue. So if you're using a plasticized water distribution system, and I love PEX, it's so easy to run and work with, then there's no requirement to bond that water system to the electrical system. Gas pipelines, another one you have to, propane or natural gas. Propane in your case, if you have a propane heating system in your house, you have to bond the metal piping on the propane system, in other words, from the tank to the furnace. It has to be bonded back to the electrical system as well, for obvious reasons. You don't want that to become energized by straight currents or whatever. It's just another code, right? But the water system is always a challenge. And there's a lot of communities with municipal water systems now, even up north. 90% of them are copper, but I can see them using PEX or plastic, some kind of plastic alternative in the future. And all it saves for rule is you don't have to bond because it's plastic. Anything else?
Whose responsibility is it to replace old, decaying hydro poles?
Depends on who your service provider is. If it's Hydro One, it's their responsibility. If it's an independent, it's the bank, the council's responsibility. That's part of the stuff I do when I do the audits. I check the base because they usually run straight at the ground. And I'll check those. One of the biggest problems we've got up there, the kids see it, they do it here too, is the guy got the yellow covers they put on this thing. It's up there, it's all four-wheeler sewing machine. And I've had so many incidences of people running down the line and getting clotheslined on guy wire. And it's an actual hazard. Utilities face it daily. But as far as the rotten poles are concerned, he who owns the distribution is responsible for replacing the pole. And you usually get a report if I do it on it. That's one of the main things. Either a cracked pole, you got woodpeckers affecting things to nothing, rotting, and that's the huge infrastructure I was talking about. These poles are all starting to, it's been 40 years. Most of the community's 40 years ago. That's when it all went in. And now it's all starting to come down around the ears. And I've had discussions with INAC about that. I said, somebody has to take the bull by the horns. Because they fund most of the stuff that's put in the First Nation community, to me, they've got a responsibility somewhat of ensuring that that's safe. I mean, if you're going for funding to replace something, normally you'll go to them, or CMHC for housing, or whatever, for both of them. But as far as the infrastructure is concerned, and they'll test the waters with me, they'll say, no, we're not responsible for that. Well, okay, if something falls down and kills a kid, and the coroner's inquest, and you can be sued, and then we'll see what the Solicitor General says, who's their lawyer. I know I've talked to them, and they somewhat agree with me that they have some kind of a responsibility to ensure. Now, who else would there be? Like on the community, who would be able to go around and say, unless it's obvious that the pole's broken, but who's to say that you've got cracked insulators, the top is rotting off, or the cross arms are falling down, or the pole. There's really nobody employed by those 13 independents that are existing today to go along and do a nod every once in a while to say, hey, we're in trouble. Like I'm going to do. I can do it under time. How are we doing? Oh.
If a contractor hires a subcontractor from another province, is that recognized in Ontario?
Yep. On First Nations community, the licensing part of what we do is not required on First Nations communities. Is he supposed to be capable? Yes. But does he have to have an Ontario license to operate, whether he's a sub-trade or the primary trade, doing work for you? Like, I can't go up there and criticize him because he's licensed. I can't go into First Nations community and hold him accountable if he properly licensed in the province of Ontario. Do I ask if he's got a license of some description? Absolutely. If he doesn't have a license, he can still operate there. There's very little I can do, but I can make his life real miserable.
What material?
He has a license.
Huh?
Can we ask if he has a license?
You should. Yeah, you should make it part of the tendering documents. You know, what you want is if you're not going to be employing your band people, I haven't got what you're about to. If you're going to tender this and have people wire houses like Brown Lake or I don't care where it is, make it part of the tendering documents that he'd be a licensed electrician. In Ontario, you can go that far. You know, like you're the client. You can ask for whatever you want. You can ask for an Ontario licensed electrician. You may not get it because a lot of your packages go to Manitoba, and they'll bring a Manitoba guy. But absolutely ask for a licensed electrician. Primarily, you should be asking for a licensed electrician within the province of Ontario. That makes everybody happy. Ontario. One of my biggest pet peeves, the packages that you order, they're getting better. When I first started here, I could kill some of the suppliers. Absolute kill. Well, they don't keep up with the code. Like that tamper-resistant receptacle, you know, like it took me 2 years, and I just dialed up one of the suppliers in Manitoba, and I read him the riot act. I said, the next time I don't see a code compliant piece of material come into this province, if you're supplying the packages and advertising that you can do that, I said, I'm going right straight to your head office. I said, I will not tolerate them sending packages for houses without the airflow break. And of course, I have to be careful because a lot of times they do supply it, and some of the band electricians don't know what to do with it. So it didn't come, it didn't get installed. So I got to be careful of who I'm going to blame for it not being there. It's still a deficiency as far as I'm concerned, but who was defect? Was it the supplier supplying the material, or was it the non-electrician who's supposed to be installing, or a contractor? So a contract was easy because he knows, he should know. Otherwise, he shouldn't have a license. But yeah, the suppliers have been a challenge for 20 years that I've been doing it. And I've made 3 or 4 phone calls. In fact, I talked to some of the people that were, just to make sure. Like some of the suppliers that had booths here. You know, I went over there and I said, are you sending this? Are you sending this? Are you sending this? Because the band says you didn't. And most of them will come back with an invoice plus a check off when it receives on site that it was sent. In both cases that I had incidents this year, it was the supplier, it was the band install that was in error. So I go back to the band and I say, no, you got it somewhere, go put it in. If you've lost it, you're responsible to go buy it. It's not the supplier's fault because it's checked off on site as being received. So I don't like, or my boss needs it when I do that because it's not my business. My business is to walk in, if it's not there, give you defect. And I said, well, okay, that's okay if I'm down on Simpson Street here in Thunder Bay, because I'm dealing with contractors. But up there, that's part of working with First Nations communities. You know, we go the extra mile. You know, we try and help them out because they're buying a package for $250,000, which should be $110,000 for a house, and they're not getting what they paid for, or they're not having installed what they paid for. By the way, I'm retired, so I need a job. Anybody here want to?
I got a question.
Shoot.
I tried to put my head on. I'm only retired.
Ah.
Old houses that have been disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And I go on disconnected. And each period of time, you won't re-hook it back up.
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
And they want the whole electrical to be inspected.
Yeah.
And which is possible for the owner.
It is. There's costs involved.
It's like $2,700.
Well, not per month. No. What it's talking about is houses that have been disconnected for whatever reason, either arrears or the people moved out of the community or whatever. And there's a rule, it's a utility rule, soon to become a code rule, that after 6 months of being without power, they require an ESA inspection, which is us, to go in and look at the fitness of the house and approve it for reconnection. Our fee for that is around $400. That's what we charge to do general, because what it calls is a general inspection for reconnection. And where you, well, Gulf Bay's even less. It's $400 up north because there's a travel component, but I don't charge travel. Well, not ESA. If you do, send me the invoice, because you got overcharged. Yeah, well, that's high. I'm not high. I can't tell you what their costs are.
My question was, you talk about jurisdiction, you have jurisdiction over it. So why is it we're being stopped in reassessing building?
Well, it's their rule as a utility, and it's our rule as an inspection authority. When we do an inspection on the service, and you've got Hydro One as a service provider,
The way I look at it is the house was built, and electrical work was done on it,
right?
right? So why is that to be reassessed?
We find that about 40% of the houses we re-inspect have deficiencies. Number one, we don't retroactively apply the code. So if we went into a house that was built in 1955 and it was built to that standard, as long as it's still not damaged,
I'm talking about your house.
well, newer, what does that mean? Like I just did 7 houses.
6 houses that were built prior to 6 months of connection.
Yeah.
And you have to go inspect those buildings.
Okay, if I did a new house in Gull Bay, and I just did 7 Franklin, say, and if I inspected that and it hasn't got hooked up within 6 months, I don't know about it. It's a question, no, I do not. Hydro One will call me and say, it's over 6 months, and I said, is that one of the new houses that hasn't been occupied area, or that has been occupied, you got the extension or, okay. There's nothing can happen to a new house, usually within 6 months unless it's vandalized.
When I was looking at one house, it was inspected, they did some work on it, it didn't get hooked up again, maybe 20 years because of their rear light.
That's different.
And then we went back in there again, he was charged again. Yeah.
Well, if I did one inspection, if it's 2 years from one inspection to the other, you got to have it done twice. That's a long time. And I don't care if you're up on the First Nations community or you're here in Thunder Bay, normally there's been people in that house who are powered up by,
It would be wise to contact them first and inspect
absolutely,
rather than getting the electrician in there.
absolutely. That's the best way to go. There's a lot of things that happen business-wise in First Nations communities that should be changed. Number one, don't call me for an inspection unless you know it can be hooked up. And that's a business thing between you and your band members. Like most band members have their own account. The bands don't pay for the power, the individual does. If that individual can't make,
I think in this way, it's cheaper for us to do it that way.
well, sure it would be. Don't call me unless you know it's hooked up.
You wire the whole thing, if you get away with it.
And that happens. But all I'm trying to say is don't call me to inspect unless you know the business part, which means the customer assigned for power, paid whatever arrears and settled up on hydro get hooked up. Don't call me, because you're going to have to call me back in 6 months. If they can't make that payment, 6 months later they're going to have to start all over again, and it's just a waste of money. I've done inspections 3 or 4 times in the same house and nobody's been in. And I can't keep track of it. I just get the permit and I go and do my job.